Today on Money Life.
So one of the advantages of a mini retirement is it's kind of like a practice round. It's a little test drive for your retirement. You've got this big list of things that you imagine you're going to enjoy. Why not experiment with them? Why not give a couple of them a try? See if you do enjoy it. And if you don't, you can cross it off the list. And maybe you still have 10 or 20 years before traditional retirement to think up some new ideas.
That's Jillian Johnsrud, author of Retire Often, who in today's interview pretty much answers the question that she asks on her podcast, which is, why retire once when you can retire often? But we start this show with Chuck Carlson, Chief Executive Officer at Horizon Investment Services, who used to publish the Drip Investor newsletter. And he's here to answer a listener's detailed question about investing in drips these days. Plus, Chip Lupo, analyst at Wallet Hub, discusses their 2025 Money and Relationships survey, which showed that nearly 1 in 3 people think their relationship is limiting their financial growth. And we bring you the first interview from FinCon as Doug Nordman from MilitaryFinancialIntelligence.com joins me. All that, plus I give you an update on my first meeting with my grandson, Declan. Welcome to Money Life for September the 10th, and I promise you there's nothing to cry about on this show. Nothing for me to cry about at all. What a spectacular weekend I had getting a chance to meet my grandson. Declan James Curis was born on August the 24th. I didn't get to meet him until Saturday. We will post a picture or two on our Instagram. Follow us, please, at Money Life Show. We'll post it maybe on our Facebook page as well. You know, all those things. If you are on those services and you don't follow us, following us helps. Like us, do those sorts of things. It's all good for our social stuff, and that could help us get paid. We don't charge you anything for the show. We don't think we're asking a lot necessarily to follow us, but I will put up a picture. Declan and I were styling for the Michigan-Oklahoma game on Saturday night. Even if the game didn't turn out the way we wanted to, the experience certainly did for me. So yeah, I have a new love in my life. I'm super excited, and you will hear more about him and all the things I'm doing for him as best I can to be a great grandfather, but also one who raises a financially savvy and smart grandson. But I went from North Carolina on Tuesday, left to go to FinCon, which is in Portland, Oregon. So I'm on the West Coast for a conference that officially starts today. But you could check in and do some things at the end of the day on Tuesday, and that gave me a chance to catch up with my friend Doug Nordman. So we'll have that interview. Now, Jillian Johnsrud happens to be at FinCon, but her new book is out this week, and I didn't want to have you with the background noise and the things that we do when we're traveling at FinCon. So we got that interview scheduled before I ever left. And I think it's an important interview for several of you, specifically I'm thinking about in our audience, guys who have told me you plan to retire internationally for sure, but several of you who question what you would do in retirement. And I have to tell you, I'm somebody who's never pictured myself as retiring, but the idea of mini retirements and the idea of trial runs, whether it's, go live in a foreign country for a month and decide if you can do it in that country and you'd like to be there, or it's take that time and do that thing you've wanted to do and see, will you have enough joy if you suddenly say, oh, well, my mornings are not going to include going to work, but they are going to include going to the local senior center or doing this other thing that I wanted to, or volunteering for that group or coaching or roughing or whatever it might be that's important in your life. So I love the concept, and particularly as it applies to that quote that we had where it's talking about doing this as a dry run, as a trial. And I encourage several of you who have talked to me about some of your plans, maybe this is a way to do it. And I'll point out that although my sister is retired because she is a little bit older than me and her husband is 11 years older than she is, she's kind of doing this herself in that they travel to get out of the cold every winter, and they basically make sure that they spend 1 month in a place that they might be looking to move to when they finally decide it's time to be in warmer weather all year long. So they kind of say, okay, let's get out of Chicago in the winter, and will go someplace and they travel and do some other things and do whatever other stuff they want to do. And then for the last 3 or 4 weeks, they pretty much set up shop outside of a community, like a retirement community, an actual community that they've looked at and considered. They'll stop in and visit the community, check out things that are going on, and then they will spend a month living in the town or the city or whatever it might be and going, okay, could we do this? So I really like that concept. As for what's coming from FinCon, well, we've got great stuff. I'll tell you about it at the end of the show. And tomorrow when we start, I'll give you a little bit of a spiel about FinCon. But right now, this is mostly like any other show. A great question, a really detailed one. Chuck Carlson was super impressed. He's always impressed with the stocks you request. He was just here doing the market call, but was super impressed with the question that we got. Interesting study with Chip Lupo, that book from Jillian, Doug Nordman. It's a great day to live the money life. And yeah, you can't beat the smile off my face because I am digging Declan. But right now, I hope you're going to dig this show. We'll get to the talk right after this message.
To navigate today's complex market, investors need accessible, quality research. Vetify offers free webcasts from portfolio experts and industry leaders. Earn CE credits and take your portfolio to the next level. Go to etftrends.com/webcasts and learn more.
Did you know that there are at least 23 million American adults who can't read a want-ad?
It's called reading. Top to bottom, left to right. Group words together as a sentence.
Money Life presents.
I'm chatting with my guest, author, lecturer.
You get him to open his mind and his future.
The Book Interview.
Give a kid a book and you'll give a kid a break.
That's gonna be radical, Chuck.
Reading is good. Can we start the story now?
Oh, yes, we can start the story. And to me, it's one of the most interesting stories in the financial world because my guest is Jillian Johnsrud. She is the host of the Retire Often podcast. She is the author of a new book out this week, Retire Often. And although I talked with Jillian last year at FinCon, and she's going to be at FinCon this week, as am I, well, with the new book out, we wanted to talk about this first. And we really want you to get a taste of it because this, to me, is one of the 5 or 10 most interesting stories in personal finance and one that nobody talks about. Like we talk about retire in a lot of ways. We don't talk about it this way. If you want to learn more, retireoften.com is her website. Add /book to it, and you will find all the information you need on the book. By the way, we've got a couple copies of the book that we will be giving away in a contest. That contest will be next week on Money Life when I am back from FinCon. Jillian Johnsrud, great to chat with you again.
Thanks so much for having me.
Retire Often. I am a 63-year-old guy who loves what I do and says all the time, I am not likely to retire ever, although I now acknowledge I could anytime I wanted, and I could go to what little parts of the world that I want. But you, and I don't think I'm disclosing anything you haven't disclosed personally before, you are a 40-year-old woman with relatively young children, and you have retired multiple times. So we need to start with how you define retirement compared to the conventional version of retirement, which makes retiring often possible.
Yeah, I think traditional retirement implies that it will last for the rest of your life. It's a one and done thing. You're going to work a whole bunch and then you're going to retire a whole bunch. I like to think of mini retirements. How do we get the same vibe of a retirement, but in a really tiny version? So I define a mini retirement as anytime you step away from your 9 to 5 for a month or longer. I think a month is kind of that minimum effective dose to focus on something that matters to you.
Stepping away from a month means if you've got enough time or what have you, you are stepping back to your job. So since you talk about retiring often, how many times for you has retirement meant a work reset where like you come back and it's to the next gig?
Oh, that's a good question. Maybe, so I've done a dozen mini retirements. I would say maybe 4 or 5 of those was in between jobs.
And define, so my audience is hearing a dozen mini retirements. Since we know it needs a month to be the smallest, we'll assume that maybe there's 1 or 2 that were at the month end, but shortest to longest.
Yeah, shortest a month. I've done a number of month ones. And I always encourage people to start with a month because It's like a high reward, low risk. It's not super hard to get the time off. It's not super expensive, but you get a ton of benefits. So I did in my 20s, I did a month-long road trip, DC to Seattle and back with my best friend, which was amazing, like sleeping on people's couches and camping on the frozen ground, almost getting trampled by bison, like all the highlights. And just last year, and I'm actually 42, just last year, I took a month off to learn tango, and it was an amazing experience. There again, it doesn't have to be a huge amount of time. And I set a budget of $1,000 to learn tango. So it doesn't have to be massively expensive, but you get all of those benefits of traditional retirement, all that stuff that you're like, man, once I retire, I would love to, spend a month fishing in the Caribbean or hike the Camino or do this big road trip. Like you could just do those things now and sprinkle them into your regular career.
But people hear that and they say, okay, tango, how immersive is that? Because most people think, okay, I want to learn. Like my best friend has retired from his medical practice. He's taken up his creative side. So he does mostly photography. But as he also points out, he got himself a piano because he always wanted to learn to play it. Never learned as a kid, though his parents had one, etc. And he's got a piano that he does not immerse himself in. The joke is when he comes to my house, he's not playing the piano here in front of anyone.
Yeah.
So when you're doing this and you're doing this retirement, is it, I'm keeping a daily schedule on my retirement? Help us understand what retirement looks like for you and in the kind of retirement you're doing versus the kind of thing that says, well, I'm not going to work anymore and I got to fill my days. Because you're not doing let me figure out. If you got a month, every day that you waste or don't use is very different than the person who's, I'm done working and I'm going to try to figure out what's next.
Yeah, it's important to have a plan. It's important to be intentional because a month can go by so fast. So you want to be able to get the most out of it. But like you mentioned, there's a lot of things that we think we would enjoy in retirement. And we kind of blame work as the reason we haven't been able to do that. Like it's a great excuse. But the reality is when faced with unlimited time, we don't actually like that stuff that we waited 10 years to pursue. So one of the advantages of a mini retirement is it's kind of like a practice round. It's a little test drive for your retirement. You've got this big list of things that you imagine you're going to enjoy. Why not experiment with them? Why not give a couple of them a try? See if you do enjoy it. And if you don't, you can cross it off the list. And maybe you still have 10 or 20 years before traditional retirement to think up some new ideas.
Well, in fact, I'm literally thinking of specific members of the Money Life audience. Tony in Henderson, Nevada, who's made it very clear to me that he intends to retire abroad, but hasn't picked his place yet.
Yeah.
Right. So the idea that you say, wait, I can do a couple of mini retirements and do them over 10 or 15 years. If you've made that kind of a decision, you in some of your retirements, because you've lived abroad and you've done traveling and a lot of things along those lines, the idea that says, okay, I'm going to retire this year to Portugal and I'm going to retire in 2 years to someplace else, that makes a lot of sense. The flip side of this, to do your sort of thing, do people have to, maybe have enough vacation? Because, at a certain age, you don't want to be back in the job pool necessarily, and plan it out as well to make sure that, like, most people kind of go, I'll take a week of vacation here and a week of vacation there, as opposed to a month at a time. So, how are you limited by your employers and what they say if you do want to keep your day job when you're done retiring?
For a lot of people, they assume they wouldn't be able to negotiate this off, either because their company doesn't have this policy, no one else has done this. But I find with a little bit of preparation, it's usually much more possible than people imagine. So I encourage people first, there's kind of two elements you need to consider. First is how are you going to present this story? And I encourage people four elements of the story. Make it positive. This is not a time to be super negative. Like I can't stand looking at all y'all's face for the next month. Make it something interesting, not just like I'm going to go home and veg, but I'm thinking about retiring in 10 years. I am curious about Portugal. I would love to go and spend a month in Portugal is something interesting. Make it something specific. So instead of, I just want more time with my kids, say, we want to do this big road trip to these 4 national parks. Something very specific, and make it seem like a one-time event. This isn't something you're going to be asking for every year. It's not ongoing. This is like the exception to your life. You're going to go hike the Camino. You're not hiking the Camino every year. You're going to do it one time. You're going to go to Machu Picchu. So if you put those 4 elements of a story together, and then the other thing is that your boss is busy. They got lots of stuff to do. You cannot make their life harder. So think through all of the objections they would have, think through all of the concerns, and come up with some solutions. And the counterintuitive part of this is don't wait for them to tell you what their concerns are. Don't wait for them to tell you why it won't work. You speak out loud the things they're thinking in their head. You go, I know you might be concerned because we've got this big project coming up and we're halfway through, but I've thought about the timing and here's who can cover and here's how this would work. Say those out loud and kind of take on that role as well.
Yeah. One of the things I really like about the book is that all of the concerns that I think somebody might have that, I would have had as a person who comes from the traditional personal finance background, you pretty much address all of them. Like, they're going to tell you this, you need to be prepared for this. But there's one thing in here that I found really, really interesting that I want you to explain to folks, which is the question a lot of people are going to have is, how do I afford this? And you literally say that it's 6.5% of your income. If you set aside an extra 6.5%, you're going to be able to afford 1 month off every other year. Work through that math for somebody who goes, okay, 6%, but doesn't it matter how much I'm making? Doesn't it matter? Why is it 6.5%?
Yeah, so this is kind of a worst case scenario. This is assuming that this time off will be unpaid. You didn't get laid off and you have kind of a compensation for 6 months. This is entirely unpaid. So you have to cover that month of take-home pay, those expenses. And it assumes that you're going to have a little bit of a budget for whatever this extra adventure is above your normal expenses. And this accounts for 50%. Your mini retirement budget will be 50% of your take-home pay. So it scales with your income. And it kind of scales with not your quality of life, but kind of your standard of living. So if you bring home $2,000 a month, you get an extra $1,000 for your mini retirement. If you bring home $5,000 a month, you get an extra $2,500 budget for this cool adventure. You bring home $20,000, you get $10,000 extra for this mini retirement adventure. So if we think about mini retirements, you're going to have multiple of them across your life. As your income increases, you can do the more expensive options. And so I always encourage people, if you've got a bucket list of 20 things, front load the affordable ones. Start with kind of the budget ones. You're going to learn guitar, you're going to learn tango, you're going to start a garden in your backyard, you're going to do a road trip, and save the European river cruise until you're 70, because you can totally enjoy that when you're 70, and that's like 20 grand.
My audience will have another question for you that's different from all of this, but we do need to know before we finish, now that you're back at work with the book coming out, etc., how often will you be dancing the tango?
I love tango so much. I'm obsessed. But it was one of those things I thought about my 80-year-old self. And sometimes mini retirements are like a business capital investment for your future self. If you invest in getting in shape, you invest in a hobby, you invest in your relationships, like you do personal therapy, you do marriage therapy, like whatever it is, those are going to keep paying dividends. Like those are going to keep rewarding you year after year after year. And for me, tango is that. I thought about my 80-year-old self and I was like, dude, she wants to dance tango. She wants the mental stimulation. She wants the exercise, the flexibility, all the social interaction, all the friendships. Like that's such a gift to give her. And if it's only going to cost me a month and $1,000, like I'm all in. She's thrilled with that idea. So I still try to dance tango 2 or 3 times a week. But for a lot of people's hobbies, sometimes you need that jump start. You need that thing to kind of get all the pieces together. But then it's something that you can maintain when you go back to work.
I think about all of this for people like my wife. My wife works for a company that is generous with her time off to a point. You have this time off. You need to use this time off. If you don't use it, we're not paying you extra for it, which that would be a reason to say, okay, I can forego a vacation or whatever. And my wife was always going, yeah, I need to take a little bit more time. For folks who have trouble taking all their time off, this changes that equation, doesn't it? This is like, wait, if you have that time, plan it in a way that you can go, here's my weeks here, here's my weeks there. What can I do put that in there because this is the opportunity that I think that somebody like, my wife has told me, yeah, there have been times when I've used half of my vacation and the rest of it expired. This is how you get that taken care of, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And it gives you a more compelling reason. Because if you're just like, I'll take a couple extra days off and like I'll do some doctor's appointments and I'll get caught up on housework. And then you're going to come back to more work and more stress when you do come back to your job. But you can do something really cool and really interesting in a month. And to your point of where you might never want to retire, mini retirements are a great alternative. Because all of those things, you're like, if I had more time, I would like to do this. You can just start doing them now. And you learn to pivot between this intense work and something you're passionate about and this personal life and these other goals. And then the compulsion, that need for forever retirement, for traditional retirement, kind of goes away for some people because they love their work, but they also love these mini retirements and they get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I can definitely see it. It's actually, as I was reading the book, I'm like, yeah, this is maybe how I do it. But it also begs one more question. In all the people you've talked to about retiring often, et cetera, how often does somebody go on a mini retirement and go, I got to go back to that job? Because again, they're not a mini retirement. Let me start the next thing. Oh, I know people who have retired and said, oh, now that I'm retired, I really need to find something to do. I have this other passion. I'll go do it. And they weren't thinking it would become their job. And they're like, yeah, I can do this. But how often do people, when they're taking the mini retirement, oh, okay, it's a month. And then they're like, I just had this fabulous month. And now I got to go back and work with these people in this gig. Isn't there some risk that you could hate the rest of your life coming back from a retirement?
It is a huge concern that people have before they take one. It's honestly probably one of the biggest hesitations I hear is that they view it like a prison break. Like if they get this taste of freedom, getting pulled back into prison would make it somehow worse. But the reality is, I think once you step away from something, you start to appreciate the benefits of it as well. The longer you're away from work, you're like, actually, I kind of liked the interaction. I like the friendship. I like the sense of structure and the purpose and the meaning. Like I have 5 kiddos. And I'll be at FinCon for a week. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Like sometimes when I'm in the thick of parenting, I'm like, oh my gosh, these kids are driving me crazy. But after a week gone, I'm like, oh, I miss them so much. They're so sweet and wonderful. So for most people, they really appreciate the upsides a lot more if they've just had a little break from it.
Well, we unfortunately have come to the point where we have to take a break from our show in this interview, but the book is fabulous. I very much appreciate you joining me on the show to talk about it. I look forward to seeing you at FinCon, and thanks for coming back on Money Life.
Thank you so much.
That is Jillian Johnsrud. And yes, you can learn about her at her personal website, JillianJohnsrud.com. You can learn about the book, Retire Often, and the Retire Often podcast at retireoften.com. Add that /book. And by the way, again, a couple of copies we'll be giving them away next week. So don't even plan your retirement until you maybe do that. But you can get the book now. It's out this week. So if you don't want to wait for the contest, go and buy one. You don't have to wait long for Money Life to come back because no, we're not retiring. We're just taking a quick break and then we'll be right back at it in just a moment. Stick around.
Everything an advisor needs in one newsletter. Go to advisorperspectives.com and see why 100,000 advisors are subscribed to our newsletter.
Now Money Life looks at what the survey said. This is The Survey Said. It's where we dig into surveys, studies, polls, researcher data that's going to help us understand what people are doing for, with, and about their money. And today we're looking at what's happening with their money and their relationships because we're looking at the 2025 Money and Relationship Study out from Wallet Hub. And this survey, we know how much money impacts relationships, but nearly 1/3 of people think their relationship is limiting their financial growth. So this is kind of an interesting one that way. It's a lot of interesting stuff. And there's no one right way to do this stuff when it comes to relationships. So if you want to check out the survey and get more information, well, it's wallethub.com, where, by the way, they have plenty of tools that will help you get better control of your wallet and get better deals if you're looking for credit cards and things along those lines as well. they also have this information that maybe you can compare how you and your money and your relationship are doing to everybody else. Here to discuss it, Chip Lupo. He's a writer and analyst at Wallet Hub. Chip, great to have you back on Money Life.
My pleasure, Chuck. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so nearly a third of people, the headline number here was nearly a third of people think their relationship is limiting their financial growth. Is this because like they're spending too much on their boo? Or is this because like, hey, if I didn't have to worry about you, I'd have a better job or I'd do whatever. Like, how is their relationship limiting their financial growth?
It's interesting you mentioned that, Chuck, because it's a little bit of both, I think, because when I first read this, it says their relationship. Now, this doesn't define whether you're married or dating. So it could be a little bit of both. If you're married and maybe you're in an area in which there's plenty of lucrative job opportunity for your spouse, maybe your career path's a little bit more limited, that could be a concern.
Yeah, I can see that. Is there a flip side in this? Are there people who say my relationship is expanding my financial growth? Like, is there some percentage of people that say it's neutral, it's not doing anything, but some percentage that say, thank goodness for my spouse, they're really helping me?
I think so. I think it works both ways. I had a friend recently who he was an attorney, and he also worked a side gig as a sports writer, put every penny that he made towards all the bills so his wife could finish up her degree in library science. She got her degree. They're both doing quite well. He's no longer an attorney, and now he's a full-time sports writer, making a little bit less, but it balances out, and both parties are happy.
Yeah. I mean, I think in my own case, my audience knows that Gail and I got married not quite 2 years ago at this point, and the joke for us was, I'm marrying her for health coverage, et cetera, because she had a great healthcare plan and I was paying for my own. So, you can certainly see things happening there. The other side of this is that you didn't just look at how people are being limited. You also looked at where folks were getting into trouble. And about a quarter of people believe that if they're sharing financial accounts, that's worse rather than better. Is that just caused by the fact that, you and your spouse don't have the same money habits, or is there something more there?
Well, I think it's money habits has a lot to do with it, but that's something I think that should be sort of established before you begin your relationship. But I think it has more to do with a lack of communication. Because if you have one person who is managing the finances, they're looking at the bank statements and credit cards, and they notice something that's not supposed to be there, and getting blindsided with charges and not being aware of it, that creates problems. I know in a lot of cases when people have shared accounts and you see a charge from Amazon or wherever, and then you confront your partners, and then they would be forced to say, well, I was getting you I wanted to surprise you with a gift or something. So that creates that kind of a problem also. But the root of it, I think, is communication or lack thereof.
Well, you talk about the surprising someone with a gift, et cetera. On the one hand, folks were saying shared accounts cause trouble. On the other hand, shared accounts catch cheaters, or at least that's what they believe. And I love the fact that they believe that. Of course, that only works if their spouse isn't cheating and you've never caught them, right? Like if you haven't caught them, but you have a shared account, then you're wrong and you still have a problem. But
yeah, and you're also paranoid if you're
exactly.
If you're relying on your bank account to be basically your private detective to try to catch someone cheating. Yeah, finances are probably the least of your problems.
The other thing that I found really interesting is that there was a number in here that said almost 3/4 of Americans believe that financial disagreements are worse for their relationships than political disagreements. And we know that politics divides families. Finances typically doesn't, unless it leads directly to a split, because we know that financial reasons are a huge cause of divorce and separation in this country. So is the problem that we don't see eye to eye on how money is spent and we can't come up with something that works for, us as a couple or something along those lines? Or is the problem that, we're fighting over money because money's about control more than it is anything else?
I think it's more towards the latter, because just like with political disagreements in a civil society, you can have your minor disagreements and iron them out, but it does go more to what you were saying before. And I think it does become a control issue with that, particularly if you're going back to the shared accounts, and you have one person who's managing the finances and maybe trying to put brakes on spending and get in these confrontations. So, yeah, I do think it leans more toward the latter.
And from your perspective and the research that you've done, not only on this one, but other stuff where you've looked at the stuff that goes on Valentine's Day and all the rest, is there something that you have gleaned that you're kind of like, if somebody asked me for a relationship and money tip, here's what I would have to make it that you fall on all the positive sides of these kinds of studies?
Yeah, well, again, if they're asking me, I would always say, keep the communication. Just keep communication. Now, sometimes it's going to get a little heated, but if you nip those things in the bud, I think you'll be better off in the long run.
Better off is what you're shooting for, but you want to be better off if you're in a relationship as a group, as a team. You got to find the right way to do it. Really interesting stuff. Again, take a look, folks. Go find this at wallethub.com and see how you stack up. See where you are. Maybe use this as the springboard to have that communication that Chip was just talking about. Chip Lupo, great to chat with you. We'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Look forward to it, Chuck. Thank you again for having me.
That's Chip Lupo, writer and analyst at Wallet Hub. Go to wallethub.com for more information. Use the link in our show notes on our guest page to get directly there. And your relationship with your spouse and money might be difficult, but your relationship with Money Life is really good. We're going to take a break, but we both agree we'll be back in just a minute with more talk, so stick around for that.
Anybody have any questions? I have a question.
I'd like to ask you some questions.
Oh, you can ask questions.
Just because I don't have the answers to your questions doesn't mean there aren't any.
Oh, definitely not. And I don't answer all of your questions. Sometimes your questions are answered by guests and people who can help me answer your questions better. And this is one of those opportunities because we've got the right question and the right guest who happen to be on the show so that we could do the market call, but agreed to give us a little bit of time. Now, by the way, if you've got a question, we'd love to get it from you.
I'm sorry, but all questions must be submitted in writing.
Send it to chuck@moneylifeshow.com and hopefully we'll get an answer for you, whether it's me or one of our guests. But joining me now to answer today's question is Chuck Carlson. And for years, for decades, I would have said he was the editor of the Drip Investor newsletter. But they have stopped publishing the Drip Investor. And it actually plays into today's question because we're talking about drips, but we're also talking about the popularity of drips and what they've done at Horizon Investment Services, which Chuck Carlson is the chief executive of, is they now publish the best dividend and income investments. That is the successor to the Drip Investor. And you may want a successor to Drip Investments. That's what we're talking about. So, Chuck Carlson, great to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me, Chuck. I appreciate it.
And I should remind people, by the way, if they want to get information on the best dividend and income investments, that newsletter, the successor to the Drip Investor, go to horizoninvestment.com. Let's jump in on this question. Of course, the best part, Chuck, may be that since we both have the same first name, when the guy says, "Hi, Chuck," he's talking to both of us.
Covering all the bases.
Exactly.
Chuck.
He writes, "Hi, Chuck. I haven't written before, but I've been listening for about 2 years now, and I have something going on in my life where I could use your help. My father passed away 6 months ago at age 102. He had a good long run, and he was himself to the end. He came from nothing and worked in a machine shop and was a really talented mechanic, and he read all the time. He lived frugally and never really talked to me much about his investments, although he taught me the importance of saving and was always reminding me that he had invested, and unlike the other guys who he worked with who didn't save and invest enough, he could live off his investments. He said he had some stocks, and once or twice he mentioned names like ExxonMobil and Eastman Kodak, and I think he once said that he liked Sears so much because he owned the stock, but I really knew little about what he had done. When I started to look at his portfolio at the end, he had become too sick to answer my questions. And he had a portfolio with just a couple of mutual funds in it and some life insurance and an annuity, and he had a pension. There were no individual stocks in the brokerage statement I found from the firm he used. I called his broker, who said Dad had said that he had stocks but didn't need help buying and selling them. Well, I just found a different file with a bunch of paperwork about different stocks he held in dividend reinvestment plans. He owned ExxonMobil and Johnson & Johnson, but also Procter & Gamble, Deere, Illinois Toolworks, Caterpillar, 3M, AT&T, Coca-Cola, and Bank of America. Those were all companies he admired. I didn't see anything from Eastman Kodak or Sears, but I don't know if that's because those companies had problems or if he sold them. And I don't know if he owned any other companies, and the paperwork wasn't in the file I found because he was good at keeping things, not at filing things. He owned some of these stocks for decades, and his stock portfolio is now a lot of money, which is pretty amazing for a guy who I think was just sending in like $25 a month on a lot of these companies. I don't have much in the way of records, and it seems like he was only getting one statement a year for most of these companies. Here's where he gets to the question. I'm not familiar with DRIPs or how they work. It seems like an old-fashioned way of doing this, buying stocks directly from the company. I didn't even know that was legal. I have learned that my mom was listed as his beneficiary for these accounts, but she's been gone for years. The will passes these along to me and my sister. But is it worth it to keep these stocks in DRIPs? Is there any advantage or disadvantage to holding a stock this way? As we go through the process of claiming them, can we transfer them directly to a brokerage account? And is there any way for us to find out if we have all of his DRIPs? I don't know if other listeners will be interested, but I don't even know where to turn to for help, and I thought you might be able to help me. That's from Larry in Carbondale, Illinois. Chuck, there's a lot there, but, as the guy who was the preeminent expert on DRIPs, well, this guy just kind of won the DRIP lottery. I mean, that's a pretty good portfolio that he's inherited. Sad that under the circumstances, but still, his father got to be 102 and left this behind. That's a pretty good legacy. But let's take this kind of one at a time. As he inherits, is there any reason for him to stay in DRIPs? I mean, you've stopped the DRIP newsletter, but it's not because DRIPs have gone away. It's just because these days people don't really need them the way they did.
Well, that's partly correct on why. The fact of the matter is this gentleman's father took advantage of DRIPs when they offered certain benefits that you really were difficult to get in a brokerage account. For example, the ability to make investments in $25 or $10 or $50 where you could buy a full and or fractional share of stock. You could do that in the case of Exxon. In the case of Johnson & Johnson, you could do that and you weren't charged any commission on the buy side to do that. You could set up automatic reinvestment where you had your dividends being reinvested to buy additional shares. So particularly for individual investors, particularly for people that wanted to invest small amounts of money, DRIPs were fantastic. And to some extent, they are still fantastic for that. The issue is that a lot of brokerage firms have adopted the various methods of investing that made DRIPs very popular. For example, you can go to virtually any brokerage firm now and trade online and do it for no commissions. You can go to a number of brokerage firms now and buy fractional shares of stock with small amounts of money. And one of the benefits of that with a broker, and this gets back to this gentleman's question, is it's like you can consolidate all of those holdings in one account. Now, as he is seeing, when you're investing via DRIPs, you're doing it per company. So you're going to get paperwork for each DRIP that you have covering those DRIPs. And it can get a little cumbersome, quite frankly. So DRIPs have become less relevant in terms of their methodology of buying and selling securities than they were certainly when this fella started doing it. And it sounds like somebody who must have read some of my stuff because, it sounds, perfect for what I had recommended for many, many years. We shifted to basically broaden the topic of dividends and dividend investing via this publication, The Best Dividend and Income Investments. And we do have a 2-page insert with each of those that we call the income statement, which does discuss newer DRIP plans and as well as other things. But yeah, the bottom line is they've become less relevant because brokerage firms have become more adapted to providing the types of things that made DRIPs appealing. Now, that's kind of the first part. So that's a long-winded way of saying, if you want to continue investing in small amounts of money through the DRIPs, you can do that, but you can do it in probably an easier way and an easier from a record-keeping way, moving the DRIPs to a brokerage account.
I want to point out here one thing that I didn't think about till I was hearing your answer, which is since he's going to be sharing this with his sister, there may be some other advantages if she doesn't want to keep him in the DRIPs or what have you. I mean, again, you've got a whole bunch of individual stocks, each one on individual statements. And one thing that people don't know about drips is that many drips do only give you an annual statement.
That's
he was
right.
talking about how he only had annuals, and like, was he missing paperwork? No, he probably isn't, because most of those probably only give him one statement a year, though some may still be quarterlies. So from an ease standpoint, given that he's got this portfolio and that whatever he's got to do for himself and his sister, or she's got to do as well, it may come to moving it once and then distributing it.
Right. And that's a good point as well. That begs a question, well, can you do that, and how easy is it to do that? The answer is it's pretty easy. What you would need to do is go to your broker and tell them, hey, I want to transfer these shares into a brokerage account, and the broker will provide you with the appropriate transfer work. You're going to need those pieces of paper that you're finding, because those are pieces of paper that were issued by the plan administrator, which are called transfer agents. And that is going to be your point of communication with dividend reinvestment plans. It's not the company. It's the company that the company hired to administer their plan. Those are called transfer agents. The good news is that there are only about 4 prominent transfer agents that cover probably 95% of the DRIP universe. And there's 2 big ones, one of them being a company called ComputerShare. And you should see that information and the contact information on those DRIP statements that you're seeing with those respective companies. That's the point of communication, of contact, for you to discuss these things, changing, because they're going to require certain things from you in order to move those securities to you. If they don't know that your father had passed away, you're going to have to provide, and they will tell you what you need to do, but you're going to have to provide death certificates and a variety of things in order to move those into your name. But you can do that. And again, you're going to be working through these transfer agents. So on the statements that you do have, you can see clearly who those come from, whether it's ComputerShare or EQ Shareholder Services or American Stock Transfer. The transfer agents are delineated very well in those statements, and they should have contact information there as well. So that's going to be probably the first place to check. As far as finding out whether there are other investments out there, other DRIPs out there, again, I would go to the transfer agents and explain that to them. And if you have your father's Social Security number, they may be able to provide you with information if there's like, oh yeah, he still has these and these. That's going to be a little bit more difficult, though, because they may not necessarily be inclined to give you that information of what else is out there.
Well, the answer is, when they know that Larry's father is 102 or was 102, they do have a responsibility to, at some point, they're either going to do this or they're going to escheat it, right? There will come a point where they have to recognize, now they may be able to keep the money there for a few more years, but at some time when the guy's around 110, they would have a legal responsibility to go, is he really? And if not, then we have to give it up to the state and the unclaimed funds office. And that's the other thing, Larry, you might want to be checking, those things about unclaimed stuff. If your father was living that long in Illinois, that's likely the place where it's going to be. But
yeah, that's a very excellent point, Chuck. That would be something, and you can do that now with a number of websites that allow you to check unclaimed property in various states. And that would be a first place to check if you're wondering if there's other property out there, because yes, it's after a certain period of time. And by the way, states are getting very aggressive in cheating property pretty quickly. So if there is other stuff out there, and this would be not just dividend reinvestment plans, but it would be insurance policies, it would be uncashed dividend checks, it would be all sorts of stuff. Anything that would be a financial asset for your father and your mother and you, for that matter. I always, usually once a year, Chuck, I go through and just check it to see what's floating out there. And I've recouped some funds that had been cheated. So yeah, go ahead and do that, because that's an excellent point you make. That would be a place to check.
Yeah, me too. Chuck, Larry also mentioned that his father had Eastman Kodak and Sears, 2 companies that went through bankruptcy, et cetera. So if he held them, and I don't even know if they had DRIP plans, et cetera, but my assumption would be any plans they had went away when the companies went into bankruptcy and wound up being sold through multiple iterations. Is there any reason for him to expect that there could be any value there and to go searching for it as he's searching for everything else? Or if a company's gone, its drip's gone too?
Yeah, that would be a long shot that there would be any value. The only value would have been if there was some value that were given to the equity holders in the case of bankruptcy or the case of, acquisition. That would be very low on my list of things to try to capture, because I think there's probably not much value there. And in fact, your dad could have easily, the father could have easily sold those too, because when he saw them, going down the tube. So it's possible. But even if there is money there to claim, it's going to be de minimis, and you're going to be spinning your wheels where I think your time would be better spent on some of the other activities we talked about.
Yeah. Again, what I would say there is that's another place where you might want to do that, looking at whether things were escheated, because if he held it all the way to the bitter end and there was any value there, all he needed to do was not pay much attention to whatever paperwork he was getting. He probably was getting the paperwork because he's 102, and unless he moved at some point, it was going to the same address. But again, not much value there, but plenty of value in this discussion. Larry, good luck with it. We're sorry for your loss, but we're grateful for the question and a really interesting perspective. And if you got more questions, you and everybody else, don't be shy. Chuck at MoneyLifeShow.com. Meanwhile, Chuck Carlson, thanks so much for doing this with me.
Thank you, Chuck.
Chuck Carlson is the Chief Executive Officer at Horizon Investment Services. And yes, they publish the best dividend and income investments, the successor to the Drip Investor. They also do Dow Theory Forecast and Upside. Learn more at horizoninvestment.com. And Money Life, well, like Drip programs, we're still hanging around, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Did you know that global generalizable robotics represent a $24 trillion investment opportunity? Top robotics and AI companies are actively reshaping industries across sectors. Learn more about capturing this investment opportunity at Vetify.com.
So officially, Money Life at FinCon kicks off tomorrow with our Thursday shows. But even Thursday and Friday, we have to do some things that are irregular, like we'll have the ETF of the week with Todd Rosenbluth on Thursday, and we'll have the Navigator with John Cole Scott on Friday. So we're going to make up for that loss of time from our FinCon by starting just a little bit early. And we're doing it with somebody who I've talked to. This is the fourth interview we've done at FinCons over 7 or 8 years. And the other side of this is every single time he's been on, I hear from you guys going, why do you only have this guy on at FinCon? And there is some truth to that, because I'm joined right now by Doug Nordman. He is the guy behind MilitaryFinancialIndependence.com. You do not have to be in the military to go to the site and learn something. But oh, by the way, if you are in the military and you've not figured out that military money has a lot of things that go with it, and you really want to have the discipline in your finances that you have in your personal life to be part of the military, this would be one of those places. And by the way, Doug will be happy to refer you to the others. There is something called Mil Money Con, which is basically FinCon for all the military folks. Since my audience is not all about the military stuff, I skip that one. But I make sure you get some of it when I get to say things like, Doug Nordman, great to have you back on Money Life.
It's great to be back on Money Life, and I hope I'm entertaining this time as I have been all the other times I've been on it.
Well, I want to start with what I consider a particularly interesting question right now. Now, you and I don't talk politics. My show's not about politics, etc. But I have talked to a couple of friends that I have in the military who are very worried. In one case, a friend of mine who he was was in for 25 years, got out, next career, etc. And his son was planning to follow that path. And his son has now been deployed in a place where his son maybe is not so happy about being deployed and is worried about his next deployment being in a domestic city and whatever else.
I can understand that.
And the flip side of that is his son is terrified that, wait, this would disrupt what has literally been a lifetime of planning that I've had since I was 18 years old. Now he's still in his 20s. But I am curious, how much is what we are seeing right now making it that there are military folks who have a financial concern that they've never had before, which is literally, are they going to be comfortable serving their 20 and out?
Well, it's not an issue of whether you're comfortable serving your 20 now. You're going to hit this career retention issue every time you get to the end of an obligation. And I tell my audience to take it one obligation at a time. Don't gut it out to 20. Join the military, something bigger than you, something fulfilling and challenging, something to be a greater part of. And when you reach the point where you feel like you have finished what you came to do, then don't be afraid to move on. If it's only 4 or 5 years in the military before you leave active duty for the reserves or guard, then do that. Don't try to gut it out. And in fact, only 15% of the people that join the military will actually serve the 20 years. Now, there's plenty of ways to reach financial independence without doing 20 years of active duty. There's plenty of ways to reach financial independence even without doing 20 years in the reserves or guard. It's more about the high savings rate. It's more about realizing your potential, whether that's in the military or out of it. And I tell people, if the military is challenging and fulfilling, then keep doing it as long as you find it that. But if you look at yourself in the mirror 3 or 4 deployments worth and find out you're not having fun, maybe it is time to leave military at the end of that obligation and go do something else. Even going to the reserves or guard can give you most of the things you enjoy about the military without so many of the sucky parts. There still will be sucky parts, but you can get a better quality of life. So if you've been planning on joining the military and staying for 20, change your mindset on that and think about all the skills you brought with you in the military that you could bring into a civilian career, and it might work out a lot better than you can tell when you're on active duty.
And yet at the same time, you know, your existence with militaryfinancialindependence.com is all about folks who are trying to work the military mindset into their money and bring that discipline, etc. So let's talk a little bit about the challenges that the military face, just so that somebody understands why there would be a Mil Money Con and why there are competition sites for you, etc. Because there are challenges that military face in the best of times, in all times.
Oh yeah, it's part of the compensation. Your military pay and your benefits are very complex compared to a civilian career, and yet we spend a lot of time in the military explaining our benefits to the people that should be using them and are not aware of their existence or don't know how to use them properly. And so I can be that person, the objective person, ideally on the outside, who can explain to you what you can do with your military benefits, with your pay, with your allowances, with your educational opportunities that you might not be aware of because you're busy learning your job and getting qualified. You don't have necessarily the time in the day to learn about all these opportunities. I can help with that. I can also help you align what you're doing in the military with your personal life. For example, in the military, you learn to be very structured and organized and very watchful and mindful of the things you do. And those are all the kinds of things you do in the military that transfer very well to keeping an eye on your personal finances, right? If we all knew at the ages that we knew things that we know now in our 40s and 50s, if we had learned those in our teens and 20s, how much further ahead would we be by now? And that's the kind of thing I can help with is, frankly, I'm helping a lot of people avoid my mistakes in their careers to reach financial independence even sooner in their careers.
Well, your mistakes, you were a long-time veteran. You were submarines, if I recall correctly.
That's right.
And explain some of those challenges and then how it set you up. I mean, you live a life that most people would call pretty enviable. You're living in Hawaii and when healthy enough, you're surfing and enjoying your time for that, although you were also an author and spending a lot of other time. But explain, you know, sort of those challenges and how you overcame them, and what would have happened if you hadn't. Like, where would you have been when you got out of the service if you hadn't had the light bulb moment?
But I talk about that a lot in the blog, maybe excessively. The point was that at my career where things were no longer challenging and fulfilling, I was too fatigued, too blissfully ignorant, and basically scared to leave active duty. And I kept that up. I gutted it out to 20 myself. I'd spent probably 6, 8, maybe even 10 years staying on active duty when I really thought that I didn't enjoy it anymore, but I was too worried to leave active duty. And that got me all the way to 20. By the time I reached a point where I'd reached financial independence and could comfortably leave active duty for the reserves or the guard, life did not suck, and I was at a relatively good command, and I was able to finish out the 20 there. But the whole point is that if you are paying attention to your finances, if you are aligning your spending with your values, right? You're tracking your money, you're cutting out the waste, you're focusing on the things you want to do. As your wealth grows, you will get to a point someday where you'll have the financial resilience to leave active duty and decide, well, I'm going to go into the Guard or the Reserves and try to do 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, and we'll see what works out. And I feel that I missed out on an entire decade of the 90s internet, the rise of the web, the rise of social media and blogging. And if I had left active duty at the 12-year point in 1994, I would have embarked on a career with that and done just fine. But that's retrospect. That's seeing now, 20 years later, what I couldn't see at the time. So I completely understand that mindset.
Well, and as we point out, it's kind of tough for the folks who are in that, who have had that as their plan.
Oh, nobody teaches you how to get out of the military, right? In fact, I joke about the military inferiority complex, where you've been taught by your supervisors, your bosses, your leaders, that you may not be able to get out of the military and succeed in the civilian world. You're barely able to hold on to the job you've got right now, let alone promote. And so it looks pretty scary when you're in the military to get out. And meanwhile, there's this whole world of veterans. 200,000 people leave the military every year, and they all manage to find jobs and be successful and build careers and lives for themselves. And they can see your potential when you're on active duty that you cannot see on your own. They can see what you can do in a civilian world. Just the fact that military service members know how to get stuff done is enough to succeed in many careers in a civilian world. Just overcoming those obstacles through polite persistence, paying attention, and figuring out what needs to happen next. You do that every day in the military, you're going to be able to do that just fine in a civilian career.
Do you worry that where we are with a political climate and the things that are making headlines, that somehow the military will be a less attractive career/financial option? Because there is a segment of the population who, if you believe that we have a K-shaped economy and that the upper is going upper and the lower is going lower, the military, for many folks on the bottom end of that K, is a path to changing their stars.
Yes.
Do you worry that that path maybe isn't being closed off, but that it's becoming significantly less attractive?
I'll say that it's all based on retention. The strength of the military is based on how many people join the military. Now, we don't need everybody to serve for 20 years. We only need a small percentage to stay till 20. But we do want people to stay in the military, develop those skills, develop the career, and keep on advancing, keep on promoting. And if the political climate changes and people are nervous about joining the military expressly because of the economy or because of politics, I would say, go read some history books. People felt like this in the 1960s. People felt like this in the 1970s when I joined at the end of the 1970s. People felt like it in the 1980s at the height of the Cold War. People felt like this in the 1990s when we were finishing the Cold War and we had just finished Desert Storm and we were going to draw down the military and have this tremendous peace dividend. And we've gone through the same thing in the 2000s and 2010s. So it's a pendulum swing. It's a cycle of history that continues to repeat itself. I would say join the military if that's something that looks challenging and fulfilling to you, a team that can get things done, being part of a mission that's bigger than you. Those are all the things that attract people to the military 50 years ago when I was looking at it, and will probably still work 50 years from now.
Doug, great stuff. I love getting our time at FinCon off to a start that is distinctly not all the conventional stuff we're normally talking about. This was great. Thanks as always.
Absolutely. See you next year.
That's Doug Nordman. Again, militaryfinancialindependence.com, his website where you can get a lot more information on all the things we've discussed and a whole bunch of things we didn't have time to discuss. And we've got just a little more time for discussion on Money Life. We'll come back, we'll put a bow on this show. We will let you know some of the people I will be talking with from FinCon tomorrow before we cross the finish line right after this message.
Everything an advisor needs in one newsletter. Go to advisorperspectives.com and see why 100,000 advisors are subscribed to our newsletter.
Welcome back to Money Life, where yes, I am out in Portland, Oregon, where Wednesday the 10th starts FinCon, though there were some meetings and things late in the day on Tuesday, and we have a great lineup. And I hope you enjoyed that interview with Doug Nordman. We're going to try to bring you just a wide range of what's here. I'm going to try to focus a little bit more on some of the fintech. So like Ravi Wadan, founder of DriveMatch.com, which does like pre-negotiated car deals. We will talk with a couple of financial coaches, though you will hear me say that's not my favorite thing to do. But there'll be unusual ones like Lauren Baker, the friendly FinDom, who brings being a dominatrix to financial advice. We'll also talk with guys who are just starting, like Alex Whitehouse, who's planning to start something called How Financial Stuff Works. And we will then talk with folks who are super established, like Joe Saul-Sehy from Stacking Benjamins, Paula Pant from Afford Anything, Lynette Calfani-Cox, who you could know from a number of different places, including CNBC and elsewhere. So we've got just a wide range of stuff. We're going to try to squeeze it all in between now and Monday's show. We may grab an extra or two if people are available, but we're going to talk a lot of fintech things. And I also will tell you more about fintech because I want to hear more from you about what you want us to do with some fintech things. So that's all what's coming. But meanwhile, if you are looking for something to celebrate, well, it's the perfect time to be at FinCon because it's National Swap Ideas Day. And that's pretty much what everybody here is doing. And then whether or not we'll cover the rest of it, well, it's National Hot Dog Day. There might be hot dogs involved, I suppose. It's National TV Dinner Day, and you can wash it down with some port wine because it is National Port Wine Day. My guests today were Chuck Carlson, Chief Executive Officer at Horizon Investment Services, horizoninvestment.com. Chip Lupo, analyst at Wallet Hub, wallethub.com. And again, the 2025 Money and Relationships Survey is in our show notes for you to look at. Jillian Johnsrud, author of Retire Often. We will have a contest for her book next week. And Doug Nordman from militaryfinancialintelligence.com, who was nice enough to join me ahead of FinCon. Thanks to them. Thanks to Rob Floyd, my producer, who has extra duty and it's extra confusing when I'm on the road. No thanks to Maho because he wasn't around when we did any of this show, although I miss him. But mostly thanks to you for being here because you make this special and worthwhile for me each and every day. The Money Life quote of the day comes from Al Sullivan. He is a retired Air Force officer turned longtime financial advisor, and he's the father of somebody who's prominent in FinCon. And I will simply say, for the rest of this week, all of our quotes will be from FinConners. They won't be from the conference necessarily. They will be from FinConners. And Al Sullivan said, there are two kinds of people in the world, those who understand interest and those who pay it. It's a great lesson to remember. So is this one. Until we do this again the next time, best thing you could do for your money is not worry too much about it. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you from FinCon tomorrow.
The people who appear on Money Life are here for your and their own entertainment. Don't take advice from us or any other podcast without doing more research and/or consulting your financial advisor. We believe our guests provide reliable information, but we can't and don't guarantee the accuracy or completeness of their statements. Opinions expressed on Money Life are those of the host and guests only and reflect their personal thinking. They're not representative policy or strategy of any employers or sponsors. This show is produced by Money Life Radio, which retains all rights to the content. If you want to use any part of this show for your own purposes, be they good or evil, you must get our written permission first. And remember, with great financial information comes great responsibility. Please act responsibly.